Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SEOs Getting Coffee. We're delighted to have you again. And today we have a very special guest with us. It's Yordan Dimitrov. And Yordan, thank you so much for joining us. At this point, I'm just going to hand over to you, let you introduce yourself, because it's always the best way to get you to introduce yourself and talk about your career in SEO.
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, my name is Yordan Dimitrov. I'm an SEO manager at Reflect Digital. We focus on behavioral science and mix that with creative insight to be able to form strategies. And we're at the forefront of the industry and making an impact day by day.
Oh,
Fantastic. Thanks, Jordan. And today, everybody's favorite subject, we're going to be talking about how AI is redefining the strategies of SEOs. And what better people to be talking with Emina and Jordan here. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really good conversation. Just to start off, I think it's I guess it's just asking the big question really is that, how have AI driven search results changed the way that SEO professionals are thinking about and looking at rankings and visibility these days, Jordan?
So I think that it has changed the metrics that we need to focus on. So historically, it was very much about positions, about clicks. Now I'm finding that more and more SEOs are focusing on the number of impressions they're getting, how many times they're being featured within AI overview. And I think that's like a shift which we need to be mindful of. Unfortunately, we don't currently have data to be able to quantify how many visits we're getting from AI overview explicitly within Search Console. So we're relying on third-party tools like SEMrush, AccuRanker, etc., to be able to determine how much traffic we are potentially getting. But equally, there has been some positive results, which I've seen for the clients that I'm working on, whereby it has actually increased to an increase in revenue year on year for certain keywords, which were actually in AI overview.
Mm. And yeah, straight in with AI overviews there. I think it's good. I mean, are you a fan or do you hate them?
tricky question.
Interesting one. It is. It is. I feel like it's an it depends question.
Yeah.
I feel like um, I find them useful to an extent, especially for like informational queries, which I think is where the bread and butter of AI overviews is, because when it comes to, for example, a recipe, I like to just know what the ingredients are and how to get it done. I'm not as interested about the story of the previous generations of the people that actually worked on that recipe. I think that that's just a bit of fluff. So I like to get straight to the point.
Yeah,
But
and
Yeah.
the user experience is like this is it from a user perspective. It is a better experience. The conversational
Yeah.
kind of way of how it works. But from like a professional and business side of
Yeah.
things, obviously, I think we would be crazy not to worry a bit
Yeah.
that
oh,
we are losing, we're losing traffic.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. You will be losing traffic.
Yeah. There was
yeah.
that study, wasn't there, recently? I think I did see it on LinkedIn. I think it was. I can't remember where, but
34%
yeah,
by,
yeah,
I think it was Ahrefs. And there's
yeah.
another one that came out from SEMrush. And there's some really interesting findings around the growth of top verticals,
Yeah.
and it's science and health.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. So my question to you, Jordan, is what do you think about that? Because obviously we talk a lot about one of the areas where
Mhm.
for search, traditional search, but also for LLMs,
Mhm.
that you need to cover is this authority EEAT side of things. But then you have the fastest growing vertical is health and is
Totally.
science. And sometimes they still get it wrong. And we know that LLMs
Mm.
hallucinate and they're
Yeah.
far off being perfect. So what's your opinion about like this a bit of a disconnect between, you need to be doing this, but then, LLMs don't work like that, and they do hallucinate, and it's in these areas that are, for me, it's a bit of a red flag. But what do you think?
Yeah, for me, like when it comes to like your money or your life queries, I feel like it's really important to get that right, because it is legitimately your money or your life situation, whereby if you are fed this misinformation, you could go down the wrong path and then potentially risk your personal health, well-being, or financial status. I actually like pulled some stats before our catch-up, because I like coming prepared and having the receipts. And I noticed that when it comes to medical, 72% of all the answers were actually from legitimate websites. So it would make sure that it features like a .gov.uk. So a recent example, I think, is, I know that it was a bit pre-AI overviews, but when we had the COVID pandemic, there was so much misinformation. And thanks to the changes which were made, there was a lot of like warning signs. And if you remember, around that time, the algorithms changed slightly, so it prioritized Gov.uk at the time, just to make sure that it limited that misinformation. So throughout the year, I know there's like major algorithm updates, but Google is constantly trying to evolve to meet the needs of the consumers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they are getting better at it, definitely. And I think it's dangerous, because it's like 70, what was it, 73%?
72 according of AI overviews.
72%.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's like 28% that are not citing really, really
Reputable
high authority.
sources. Yeah.
And for me personally, that's a percentage that I'm not comfortable with. I
Well,
mean, I'm not
it
comfortable
yeah.
even with the 1%
It's just
on these
it's
topics.
just one person that takes the wrong
Yeah,
advice and does something, and that can
exactly.
cause like actual damage, like Yordan said with that's
Mm,
yeah, there's tremendous risk when it's kind of
your money or your life, yeah.
YMYL, and I think that's I don't know. Yeah, that's the main concern. I think is obviously misinformation, but I guess the positive side, which kind of goes to that question of brand and authority, and selecting, and it's definitely an improvement to be citing sources that are established authoritative websites that do have the qualifications to talk about and give advice about this stuff. Um, obviously the downside is that you can have legitimate, independent, smaller publishers who have legitimate voices and have qualifications to back up, so it can drown them out. But actually it does do well to bring the information that it's getting from reliable and good sources,
Yeah.
which, so if it's selecting those, it kind of goes back to that question of brand, right? Is that if you are in, saying, the science or
Yeah.
health industry, is like, at the moment you should be really looking at developing your brand and you as a trusted source in that industry, right? Especially those industries. How do you think brand comes into it, Yordan?
I feel like brand is essential when it comes to the new age of AI overviews, because if we have an established brand, or if we're working towards that, we can ensure that we capture that demographic. So even down to retail, when you're looking for, say, Nike/Nike trainers, you basically are explicitly quantifying that you're after this make, and then further down you could narrow it down to the specific model, etc. Whereas the market share, when it comes to just general trainers, is really big, and it's difficult to kind of match that intent. And I understand where that's coming from. But when it comes to brand, I think that it's really important to mix it with, say, brand plus like a commercial intent query, so that we could capture that demographic. And the way that I've personally approached it is I've also started to do reporting through Looker Studio, where I filter out the queries for either Google Search Console or specific landing pages which we've optimized within GA4 to identify how much of an impact brand has and how much traffic it actually brings to the website. But I think the important metric at the moment is the conversions, the revenue, and if, for example, clients are seeing that they're getting fewer clicks to the site, that could be as a result of that informational queries which they previously used to rank for. Now they're currently obsolete, but equally they're doing really well on branded commercial traffic, for example, and as a result the revenue is actually higher year-on-year. Then there's no worries. But I feel like as an industry we've become too used to reporting things the same way that we have been for ages, and we need to evolve our reporting with the time.
Yeah, no, definitely different KPIs. Okay, so we have different KPIs. We agree on that. We agree on brand. I mean, it's like a complete no-brainer. Is there an actual difference then when you are I hate that. Optimizing, hate that word, for search, traditional search, and optimizing for conversational search? Is there a difference? What do you think?
In
It's
my
the
opinion,
geo versus
yeah,
SEO.
versus SEO. Yeah, it's an interesting debate, but in my opinion, GEO is a subsection of SEO. So in order for GEO to exist, SEO was there to lay the grounds. And I personally still refer to it as SEO. I think the differences are in terms of how LLMs actually render these sources. So in other words, I feel like SEO allowed us to be a bit more broad, whereas if you want to rank for LLMs, and within those results, you need to explore how to actually explicitly answer that topic, because I've seen several case studies where people were actually, say, position 1 on SERP, traditional results. They had a featured snippet, however, they didn't have the AI overview. And the reason why someone else, a competitor, took over that AI overview was because that they actually answered that query explicitly, although they didn't have that authority. So there are ways of looking at it, and I think it's also a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. You're very diplomatic about that. I have a bit of a, recently I did an article for Sidebulb on it, and I said that I might be eating my hat in a few months because at the moment I don't see a difference. If you've done SEO correctly, from the start, then you're fine. The problem is if you were relying on old school tactics that haven't been working for the last 10 years, let's face it, then you're in trouble even more than you were. But I might be eating my hat, so I am prepping.
But that's also okay, though. I think it's okay to for it to change and evolve, and I think that's all right, if it does change and evolve and GEO does become more of a thing, then so be it, and that's it. It's like, okay, yeah, has a significant difference to what SEO was, but I think realistically, when you break it down at the moment, like, it is just search, right? So it's and this is what we're doing as marketers, is that we know it's search marketing, where we're trying to obviously position our businesses and brands to really kind of connect with our audience and answer their queries and their problems and their questions and provide them what they're looking for. And marketing, we're trying to position our brands as being the solution to what they're looking for, right? So yeah, it's all part of the same thing. And me personally, I think it's like, it's just a clever rebrand, like many SEO tactics and things have always been rebranded, and it's just packaged in a new way to try and, I don't know,
make it exciting,
make it exciting again,
or even I think, sorry, I just wanted to add, I think it's almost like some agencies have also caught onto it because they want to rank for that particular term. So they want to be like, oh, we're the GEO agency of like #1 GEO agency of the UK, etc., or like a different market, and they want to capture that market whilst it's trendy. Emina?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's kind of, we work in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen that from the general public, from the business community, there is a demand, and because people are not, they've heard somewhere this term,
Yeah,
you can see that it's trending. So I'm not like, honestly, I do not blame any agencies who put it on their website and who are trying to rank for the term. I mean, we
neither.
considered it. We're not
Yeah.
saying that we'll never do it. Maybe we
Hmm.
will do it. Who knows? But at the moment, yeah, for me, it's kind of, there's not much. The only difference,
Hmm.
which was a point that was mentioned by Arnaut in the SEO community Slack,
Hmm.
it was around accessibility. Now, I can understand why accessibility having an accessible website could be really helpful for an LLM because
Hmm.
of how like accessibility works and how direct it is and all of those kind of things. And not many websites are actually accessible. So,
Yeah.
perhaps it's a good point for people to look into it. And it's slightly sad that people are going to just be looking into it because it helps them rank in an LLM. And it's not about people who have disabilities. They're not doing it for the right reasons. But it will surface this conversation, I think, more. So in that regard, because it's not helpful for an LLM what old school SEOs do, like for example with the alt tags, image tags. That's not helpful. Like stuffing it with keywords and all of that. It's not helpful for the readers, screen readers. It's absolutely terrible, and it's not helpful for the LLM. It's not how an LLM is trained or how grounded search will, how it works really with a crawler that's an LLM crawler. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Yes, I really see your point, especially when it comes to accessibility, but I do think that kind of we're going back to the circle of SEO and best practices. I think if you could get it right, then you're basically positioning yourself to kind of withstand the long-term changes of what I think will happen as LLMs evolve, because the models are getting better and better. Like, within like a year, under a year, we've had so many like new releases, Gemini 2.5. It's really, really progressing. And I feel like if you optimize properly, so for example, like you mentioned, make sure that the alt text is optimized, embed like the correct schema, you're basically setting yourself up to like do well in the long run when, for example, LLMs can render this additional information. At the moment, to my understanding and knowledge, they're a bit limited when it comes to JavaScript, for example. However, if
Yeah.
further down the line, they will be able to catch up with this. Therefore, you need to think of two strategies, short term and long term.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The kind of the schema conversation and like me and schema, we have
Yeah.
I have this opinion in general in SEO that with schema markup, most of the schema markup is not even used by search engines.
Hmm.
It's just not, it's such a massive library, and
Oh, it is
SEOs
huge.
sometimes kind of tend to throw everything in the kitchen sink in terms of schema, hoping that that's going to help them rank, which is like, it's not how it works. So I think there's a lot of there's always banking that happens by
Hmm.
SEOs with schema, just add
Yeah.
some schema and that
Mm.
will help you. And I think it's going to be the same with LLMs. When they finally do manage to sort out their Java crawling
Hmm.
issues,
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to be like, we're going to be in the same boat. Like, people are going to again think that all they need to do to rank is just load it with every schema
Yeah,
possible. So,
but I mean, to some extent, I think that's, that will potentially happen, but actually it doesn't, but that doesn't take away the fact that it's always been the same, that if you want to build a business and build a
Yeah,
brand, you need to do it legitimately and you need to
yeah.
build an authority in that space, right? You
yeah,
don't just kind of do quick
No
wins
schema will
and
help you if you don't have that.
yeah, like
This is the thing. So
it's
don't
like,
prioritize the schema, prioritize the brand, and
yeah.
prioritize the, like things that are actually gonna have direct impact on
Yeah,
your main KPIs. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but that's it. As soon as people can manipulate and work out and crack how they can optimize for LLMs and get in there, like, of course, people will exploit it. The same thing
yeah,
will happen as what's been happening to Google over the last 20 plus years, and longer. It's that's just what happens. Update comes in. But I think, like, OpenAI recently, I think one of the most refreshing things I've seen in a while is that OpenAI kind of rolled back an update or something, and actually said, "Oh, actually, it wasn't very good."
yeah.
I'd love Google to do that. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? If they just came out and said,
Mm.
"Oh, you know what? GA4 wasn't very nice, so we've kind of gone back to UA," or if there was that honesty.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
Um,
mean, they kind of technically did that with a helpful content update, but they didn't say
yeah, but
we're
it's
rolling it back. What they
yeah, it's just
said
so
is we're doing
cloaked
an
in
update.
PR speak, though. It's just like it's like they can never admit that. Oh my, we might have made a mistake there, or oops, so that wasn't very
No, they
good.
do. In some things, they do. And there are
Yeah.
people at Google that are very like honest, and so
There are,
let's
yeah,
give
there
them
are.
a.
There are people in every company that are very honest and lovely, you know, including me and
All
you,
right,
Emina.
moving away from the Google bashing.
Yes,
Um,
back to Jordan.
Jordan.
Jordan, I really want to ask you about talking about clicks, and you mentioned about being people losing clicks, but also like not appearing in LLMs or not appearing in AI overviews. Like, and you
Mhm.
mentioned something about being more precise with like the questions. Like, what's some of your tips? Like, what are some of your tips for a business or anybody that's looking on any SEO that's thinking, right, I want to appear more in AI overviews. I want to appear more in LLMs. Do you have some tips that you could share with us?
Sure. So, my tip would be just try and reverse engineer it. So, perform those searches that you want to rank for, because at the moment we don't actually have like a tool which gives us like the commonly like search for terms within LLMs. You could try and explore things like also asked to see if what is ranking on Google and what people are searching for is like a topical area. However, LLMs, the way that people interact with it, as Amina pointed out earlier, is way more conversational and more natural. Therefore, explore ways of like rewording the same point and seeing who appears, who gets cited, and then see what they have done to answer that particular chat query. I'd say, Emina, would you describe that in the similar way?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I was sitting yesterday actually, and one of my projects on my ever expanding list is digging out a good data set of conversational data. Now there is Hugging Face open source repository of over 1 million conversations with ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
That you can actually use. And I was thinking about how I can crunch that and,
Love that.
using Python, have a look at like what I can learn from it. However, it's obviously it's full of dross as well. People are asking ChatGPT about like what do I have for breakfast. Okay, that might be useful if you're in the food industry, but there's a lot of like there's a lot of
Jabberish, yeah.
examples where yeah, like there's a lot of garbage there that's not going to be useful, but it's 1 million conversations, which is quite a lot. So I'm thinking, how do we do this at scale? So how can I at scale look at all of the questions that are happening in around a particular brand? So what I've started doing is playing around, because I'm thinking I'll need an agent for this.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how to do it using the API. So what I was thinking about is looking at using an agent to do specific searches on a brand, and then using a workflow that outputs that into a sheet. And you can then look at it over time, how it changes, based on based on whether you are like if you've optimized something, whether it makes a difference. But I'd like to bucket it into user journeys, because there's a difference between problem aware, the
Totally.
questions, the conversation is around problem aware, and between when you're at a decision point and you're actually exploring a company, like branded search, what does X company stand for, or whatever it may be. And I'm wondering how it works. Does it happen in one window, context window, or does it go over a few sessions? So yeah. In short, I've been thinking a lot about it, but I do
Sounds
not
it.
have a
Yeah.
data set or a solution at the moment, but it's an interesting one. We can do it together, Yordan.
I'd love that,
There you go.
especially because you and I are both signed up to machine learning for SEO by Lazarina Stoy, so we could
Yeah,
maybe put our knowledge into practice. But just to kind of
exactly.
piggyback off your point, I think you kind of really nailed it there about it's no longer a linear journey, even within like people who like use LLM, they come at different stages of their user journey. Therefore, it's really vital that we don't put them all under like one bracket. And similarly, when it comes to Google search, people are also coming at different journeys, and we perhaps were previously given that additional traffic from informational queries, which were we actually own that traffic like before. So I think it's really exciting now how things change, and we have things like Shopify partnering up with ChatGPT and offering like a shopping experience, which is something that Perplexity previously offered for premium users. And I think it's such a interesting time when it comes to marketing as a whole.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the commercial models are going to change quite a lot, and it is going to be more towards paid, obviously, because that's the bottom line for these companies.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. I
lots of
think,
exciting things.
well, that's it. Yeah, it's I think that's the kind of key thing. I think that why obviously people like this conversation with AI, but it's actually it is exciting. And I think it's exciting to be at the forefront of this and marketing, digital marketing. We are at the forefront of using these tools quite early on. It's only widespread use obviously is like picking up. It's still growing. There's some people that still haven't used it or don't use it, right? They haven't even whereas we're quite experienced in using it at the now, and we have that privilege of
Just
being
use it responsibly. This is the
yes,
other
Definitely.
side.
yeah,
Let's not get into it. However, all of this tracking, all of this stuff that's happening. I mean, all of these tools that are popping up that say, "Oh, we can track AI overviews and stuff." Like, in terms of like sustainability and things like that, it's a nightmare. So yeah,
yeah, but
responsible.
there's just lots of a lot of risk and a lot of risk for businesses. I think that's the thing is that it's great to jump on and try new tools and stuff, but I think people need to start really slowing down and having a process to evaluate and analyze that really of like, okay, right, who's this company, who are they owned by, what's happening with the data, how's it how does it work, and try to understand before you kind of put all your details into it. I think because sooner or later there's going to be some big events that happen that are going to be quite negative because people have done something that they shouldn't have with an AI tool that was promising them something that didn't deliver. But yeah, Yordan, I know that this is going to happen with this conversation because there's just so many branches that we can go off
There
on.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, we did
But
a bit like have a very wide discussion, but that's the beauty of SEOs having coffee. It's
yeah,
like it's like conversational search. It could go anywhere.
It could go
Can.
anywhere. It could, and it does. Yeah. I think I find it. I mean, measurement is probably the last thing that I'd like to kind of just briefly touch on with you, Yordan. Is that the problem? Obviously, you mentioned it with AI overviews and the thing. Is like measurement of the what are your go-tos at the moment? Like, if you're measuring for a client or a business, like, okay, we're going to try to optimize for, or even see what the coverage is. See how many clicks we're losing, or because of we're not getting as much traffic these days because we're featuring more on AI overviews. How are you measuring that? And I mean, what are your tips for people that would like to kind of get better at measuring those AI overviews or ChatGPT LLMs?
So I would just give you like an explicit example because I think that might be able to like illustrate it better. So one of my clients is focusing on like nurseries, so looking after plants and then like offering specific like hedges, etc. in terms of like their product range. And I noticed using SEMrush that they're ranking for AI overviews on certain queries. So I compared the data versus the period where AI overviews weren't a thing, so like a year ago, and I noticed when they actually went into AI overviews in terms of the time frame, and on the back of that, I was able to quantify and give them like a rough estimate of, for looking at that explicit query, which points to this exact page, your organic visits have increased by X. As a result, you've had X and Y more revenue, and we can potentially attribute that to AI overviews. However, I always kind of put that caveat as we're not 100% certain because we don't have the exact data. And even within Google Search Console and the data we have available, it's still limited. I mean, we can only have 1,000 like queries that we can deal with, and we know for a fact that we rank for way more for our clients. So that's kind of how I approach it at the moment. But I always try and like read upon how everyone else is approaching it and see if we can like collaborate and help each other out, because that's what I like about the SEO community is everyone likes to share knowledge and to problem solve, and every day is unique. We have different challenges and we have different clients to like focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my biggest thing, the dreaded GA4 again, but I've watched the Vixen Digital traffic drop. Clicks just drop and drop and drop, and you match it up with the dates of when AI overviews went live. And it's obvious that this drop is because of that. So you can see that your traffic is reducing and reducing over time. But then you look at SEMrush, and then you can see, well, actually, yeah, we SEMrush is showing us that we are appearing in AI overviews. So those two coincide with each other, so you can see that you're losing traffic, but actually it's been replaced by, some of your content is being selected for AI overviews, so yeah.
Yeah,
Emina?
and I mean, like, I agree. It's tricky. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is going back to what has always been a problem for across channels, is this idea of quality rather than quantity. So how do you ensure that you are tracking quality on these pages? So you might get less traffic, but you need to find out whether the traffic that you do get actually comes in at the buying point. So whether they come in when they're ready. I don't need somebody landing on my website necessarily when they're not ready to buy.
Yeah.
What I need is people who are actually, in the decision stage. So one of the things that we've been looking at is creating custom audiences on GA4 to understand. So if these are if this is how you determine your quality lead, and that can be different factors, from how much, from website factors to things that perhaps you find out from salespeople and things like that you can actually, measure in GA4.
Measure.
And then looking at whether, if the referral traffic from LLMs is it driving more of these custom audiences that are quality to these pages, or less? Is it kind of like it's no longer a numbers game, it's a quality game. But it's hard. It's like really hard to measure that. That's always been like the hardest thing to measure.
It is.
Yeah. So
But
it's about like having soft and hard conversions, not just not just submit the form, but a lot of other signals that can point towards a quality audience. And that might be different for every business. Maybe you have a piece of content that's like absolutely amazing, and all of your sales team says, okay, like 5% of all of our closed deals actually read this piece of content. Then that needs to go into your quality KPI in the GA4 custom audience, because that anybody who looks at that is more likely to convert. So things like that.
totally. And just to kind of add to your points is I don't think we can compare apples with apples anymore. So, a year ago, like we were in a different circle together. Therefore, if we see like a year-on-year drop, it's a bit unrealistic to have those same expectations for like both us and our clients. And I think that's something that we need to try and help educate them, because for them it's like they see all the red in terms of like, okay, my clicks are down, my CTR is down, and you're like, yes, but those, like you pointed out, those clicks aren't actually giving you money. Like the ones which are actually bringing you the revenue are actually, let's say, on the up, and you're getting way more relevant traffic because those people are converting much better once they're on the site. And I guess GA4 was also the perfect mix, because when we had GA4 introduced, we couldn't really compare UA data versus GA4 data. And I think Google was like trying to teach us that, but then it was like, okay, these people will continue using UA for as long as it's available. Therefore, let's just delete it, and also delete the data, and not allow you to like overlay it unless you go through BigQuery and other platforms to then overlay it. But even at that point, you had like even sessions versus sessions. You couldn't really compare that exact. So when I was looking at pretty much as close as possible ways of setting up the tracking on UA and GA4 during the transition period, the way that the two reported was like quite different. So we had like an anomaly. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was visible that they weren't matching. And this is something that we need to just appreciate, that this is the new norm.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of time because this, we could keep going with AI, especially with Emina on here as well. So
at least I didn't go on a rant
no, it's
around
true.
calling
That's
it
true.
AI.
Yeah, you can save that.
I
Please
kept
save
on
that
saying
rant.
LLMs. Let's
That's
lead
true.
the charge.
Right. Room 404 is the section that we like to invite you, our guest, Yordan, to banish something to room 404. Hopefully never to see the light of day again. So what would your thing be to banish, Yordan?
So, in my opinion, I think it's kind of like a summary of what we just covered, which is a traditional way of like looking at organic metrics. I feel like it is something that we need to move on from and adapt our reporting, customize it. We have amazing tools like Looker Studio, which gives us that customization adapted to your client and their needs, and give them the information that they're after, because not all of them would be interested in finding all the nitty gritty. Give them that top level information, and give them like some insight as to how they could do a better job, and what you need from them in order to support them better.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Thank
Needs
you so
to go
much.
in there.
Well, it's been really good. Yordan, where can people find and connect with you on socials?
I'm basically all over. So I've got LinkedIn, I've got Blue Sky, I've got X, I even have Mastodon. It's I have a Yordan.bio.link, I think it is, or of course the Reflect Digital website. But thank you again for having me, and I'm super excited for Semantics in 2 weeks' time, I think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're delighted to have you as a speaker at Semantics as well, Yordan, where we can obviously, yeah, well, you'll have the floor to carry on this subject even more. So if anybody can make it to the Semantics, it's on the 22nd of May.
Be careful, this might go live afterwards. So
if this
it
has
might
gone
have been
live,
on the
it might have been
22nd of
already.
May.
So I'm sorry, everyone, you're too late. But if it comes out before then, come to Semantics in Brighton on the 22nd of May. No, it's been great. Thanks so much for this guy. We can have these conversations all the time, and and it's been a long one today, but I think there's some real, good content in there, and I think there's some real key issues that do need to be discussed more often. And I'm so glad that we got to do it today with Yordan. So Yordan, thanks so much for the guest. Emina, thanks again. It's been a great episode. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's been brilliant. Hopefully we'll see you next time.
Subscribe.
See you later, everyone. Bye-bye.
Listen, all of the CTA actions. Getting that in there now. Bye.
See you later.